to introduce to you Bobby Kennedy Jr. The first time I met Bobby, we had a nice discussion about fracking. And I came to realize the reason Bobby wanted to know about fracking was because he cared about natural gas. And I also came to realize over time that he cares about relationships and the future of natural gas and how that future can be strengthened. So at this time, it's my pleasure to introduce Bobby Kennedy Jr.
Fred, thank you so much.
Thank you.
I want to start by saying how happy I am to be here with this group. I've worked with Fred and a number of the people who are in this room over the past couple of years to try to build bridges between the environmental community. I've been an environmental advocate for 25 years, and the natural gas community. We have to transition in this country to a new energy economy for all the reasons that all of us know about. And I believe that natural gas is going to be a critical element of the new energy economy. I want to start by thanking Fred. We've become, over the past couple of years, great friends, and I have so much admiration for him, for his leadership, for his vision, for his humanity, for his kindness and generosity and personal loyalty. And I also want to thank Tisha, who's been leading KOGA. I've been dealing with, I sue polluters. I'm going to make that confession right up front. And I've brought over 400 lawsuits over the past 25 years. Some of them against people in the oil industry, a lot of them against people in the coal industry. But I've dealt with trade associations in all the different industries, and usually you end up dealing with people who represent the lowest common denominator of that industry. The worst actors, kind of the bottom feeders of the industry, and it's just a dynamic, and that's the way trade association works. And it's been a breath of fresh air for me to deal with Tisha, who understands what I think has a vision for a broader role that your industry ought to be playing in the new energy economy, and that we really need. I really would urge you, I hope that you'll come back out of this today with a feeling that you have friends in the environmental community, that you need to take advantage of those friendships, that you need to reach out to our community and allow us to be your friends. And I'm going to talk about all of those kind of issues. A couple of years ago, I spent a day with Aubrey McClinton down in Oklahoma talking about some of these issues, and I went home and I wrote an article for that appeared in the Financial Times and had a big impact in the environmental community that talked about natural gas as a critical element in the new energy economy. And one of the points that I made was that we have about 450 gigawatts of coal-burning generation capacity in this country. We have 450 gigawatts of natural gas generation capacity. We have about only 320 gigawatts of coal burning capacity in this country, but those coal plants are used 95 to 99% of the time, and the gas plants are sitting idle 62% of the time. They're only used 36 to 38% of the time. That's because of irrational rules that govern the marketplace, that require those gas plants to sit idle. About if we were to switch the formula around so that the gas was burning 99% of the time, we could shut down about 78% of coal burning capacity in this country. And the plants that we'd be shutting down are the worst plants. The smaller plants that are usually in heavily populated areas, they're burning very inefficiently. They generate about 50% of the CO2 from that, the carbon from that sector, and they generate only 20% of the power. They're these kind of cockroach plants that will never die. They're some of them are 75 years old. Their average age is about 45, and meanwhile, across the street from them, in many cases, there's a brand new high-efficiency natural gas turbine that's sitting idle for 62% of the time, and it doesn't make any sense for our energy sector. I published that article, and I got a lot of good response from your industry, from, I think, the kind of broadest minds in the environmental community, and I got a lot of hate mail from local people who just say, that fracking has destroyed my community. And I want to talk about that in a minute. I went on and came out of here and worked with Governor Ritter to help design and then to do everything I could to get past 1365, to actually do this in Colorado to help shut down the coal industry and transfer that power to the gas industry and increase demand for natural gas. We have a bigger battle, the biggest battle of all, coming up right now, and I think the biggest opportunity for your industry, and it's one that's largely been ignored by your industry on Capitol Hill, which is the reauthorization, the amendments, the Clean Air Act, which are going to happen. The new rules are going to be issued between March and February of this coming year. Lisa Jackson, the administrator of EPA, has been very aggressive about this issue, and she's very determined to make this happen. But we're going to have new rules for probably, almost certainly for mercury, new rules for acid gases, for NOx and SOx, and new rules for coal ash, which has been unregulated up to now and is a huge subsidized cost to that industry. I saw yesterday a secret paper that is being circulated to some of the senators on Capitol Hill, some of the coal-friendly senators on Capitol Hill by the Edison Electric Institute. It says these rules, as they're currently proposed by the EPA, are going to shut down 25% of coal capacity in this country overnight by November of 2014, and all of that capacity is going to be replaced by natural gas. The environmental community is going to strongly support these new rules. We ought to have strong support from your industry. Right now, I think over the past year that the natural gas industry has done a lot in terms of advertising to try to correct the image that it has for the American people. But if you look at the ads that are being run, they look the same as the coal ads. They say we're clean, we're local. And nobody believes coal. We've all been taught that, coal's just lying to us. And so I think many Americans are going to look at that same advertising campaign coming from your industry and say, oh, it's just another carbon industry that's lying to the American people. But there's a real opportunity for your industry right now to take a strong part in Capitol Hill, which could, the data I saw from this Edison a white paper said that even if the rules were weakened so that there's a 10% reduction instead of a 25% reduction, that it's going to increase natural gas by 10 to 15%, demand for natural gas by 10 to 15%. This is going to happen over the next 3 years. So we have a tremendous opportunity, and I hope when I go back to Capitol Hill and I'm knocking on the doors of those senators asking them to pass this bill, that there's somebody from your industry with me doing the same thing and explaining that we can power this country with clean American natural gas, and that it's going to help our kids, it's going to reduce mercury, it's going to do all of these things. I believe for many years, since I got into the environmental community, that we're not protecting the environment for the sake of the fishes and the birds. We're protecting it because we recognize that nature is the infrastructure of our communities, and that if we want to meet our obligation as a generation, as a civilization, as a nation, which is to create communities for our children that provide them with the same opportunities for dignity and enrichment and prosperity and good health as the communities that our parents gave us, we've got to start by protecting our environmental infrastructure. The air we breathe, the water we drink, the wildlife, the fisheries, the public lands, those assets that are not susceptible to private ownership, private property ownership, but by their nature are the possession or the assets of the entire community. If, on the other hand, they're called the commons or the public trust assets. If, on the other hand, and I always have believed that good environmental policy is identical to good economic policy 100% of the time. If we want to measure our economy, and this is how we ought to be measuring it, based upon how it produces jobs and the dignity of jobs over the generations, over the long term, and how it preserves the value of the assets of our community. If, on the other hand, we want to do what some of the big polluters, particularly from the coal industry, have been urging us to do, which is to treat the planet as if it were a business in liquidation, convert our natural resources to cash as quickly as possible, have a few years of pollution-based prosperity, we can generate an instantaneous cash flow and the illusion of a prosperous economy, but our children are going to pay for our joyride. And they're going to pay for it with denuded landscapes and poor health and huge cleanup costs that are going to amplify over time and that they'll never be able to pay. Environmental injury is deficit spending. It's a way of loading the cost of our generation's prosperity onto the backs of our children. And you know, we have the opportunity to transition. We have the technology, we have the industrial capacity to transition to a new energy economy. Your industry needs to see itself as part of that economy, new energy economy, instead as opposed to the old energy economy, and needs to exercise your clout to do so. You have 6 times the employees in this country, depending on how you measure it, of the coal industry. You have double the sales every year of the coal industry. And yet, in all the battles on the Capitol Hill, the coal industry, you know, is winning these battles. They're in the Kerry bill, they get $153 billion in subsidies. And there's nothing there for natural gas. So if you think they're your friends, they're not taking care of you. And what I would suggest to you is that you ought to make some new friends, and friends who are going to take care of you and who are going to understand that you're a critical part of what's happening in this country. And, you know, Lord David Putnam gave this great speech before Parliament in November last year where Parliament was debating a cap-and-trade system that's just like the Kerry bill, but it was much, much tougher, and to its credit, Parliament ultimately passed the bill. But as they were debating the bill, Lord David Putnam gave a speech. Everybody in England, virtually everybody, accepts the science behind global warming. They regard it as a grim reality that government has to take a strong hand in averting. But there's still people, vested interests, and others who say we have to move incrementally, we have to move slowly, because if we move precipitously to regulate carbon, it's going to cause grave dislocations in the marketplace. And Lord Putnam was addressing the concerns of that cohort. And he reminded Parliament that exactly 200 years before, the same body had debated the abolition of the slave trade. And at that time in England, virtually everybody was opposed to slavery. They regarded it as an abomination, as a moral catastrophe for Great Britain. But the question was, how do you abolish it? 25% of Britain's GNP came from the slave trade.